Another Republican lawmaker announcing today he will not be seeking re-election in November.
State Senator André Jacque making the decision, he says, after consulting with family. Jacque is serving the second term in the state Senate. He's also spent 8 years in the state assembly. Chief political reporter Jason Zimmerman spoke with Jacque about this decision. He is live for us in the newsroom right now. Jason.
Cami, this would have been the first time for Jacque running under new maps, but he says it was not a factor because his new district actually gives Republicans an expanded 3-point advantage, at least on paper. Well, Jacque isn't saying what he plans to do next. He is hoping to explore opportunities he says he previously could not do while he was in office. During an interview this afternoon, he told me being able to serve in Madison was a humbling experience, and being able to help people by passing legislation was a big part of it. This includes being the only GOP senator to vote against a $1.9 million allocation in the state budget recently to fund 2 homes for homeless veterans, one of which was right here in Northeast Wisconsin.
I've had my dust-ups with leadership. I've, when I feel I have the opportunity, I've stood on the table and demanded that certain issues get addressed, especially for our area.
You're the 6th GOP senator to decide not to run this November. Is there a concern heading into that election, especially when you look at what happened in the spring?
I don't think any particular die is cast. We're still an eternity away from the November elections. But I think, the focus should always be on doing everything you can for the people that put you there.
Jacque will serve out the rest of his term through January of next year. So far, 3 candidates have declared their intent to run for this seat. Chris and Cami, back to you.